this is very fitting for today's episode because we are talking about politics and the election. When I am Prime Minister, I will create the Ministry of... Enjoy the episode. Hello, and welcome to Shit I Need to Know, episode 5. And today we're going to be learning about politics and elections. Now, today my guest is Dion McCurdy. How are you going, Dion?
Yeah, good, Matt. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you for asking. I guess let's just get straight into it. So, really, we have the Queensland election coming up, and so with that, can you explain how the Australian democracy works and how does the Queensland election fit into that?
Okay, well, that's obviously a huge question, but I'll give you a little bit of a rundown. We have 3 levels of government in Australia. We have a federal government that sort of looks after, the military. It does the big income tax. It does welfare, and it does maritime, and it does all these kind of things that you'd expect need to be sorted at the national level. And then we have states and territories. They're sort of the middle tier of government, and they actually, they actually have sort of more powers in a sense than the federal government, because the federal government only has the powers that the Constitution says it does, and the state governments have the rest of the powers, the reserve powers. And then on the bottom level, we have the local governments. So, there's a lot more local governments, hundreds, let's say, in Australia at least, and they deal with more, local issues, like the sewerage and the parks and local roads and things like that. So that's the government, and we get to vote at each level of government. And coming up in later this year, I think it's the 31st of October, we have a state election for Queensland. And Queensland's quite a unique state in many ways, but specifically it only has one house of parliament, only one chamber. They call it unicameral. So it's called the Legislative Assembly. And so when you go to vote this year, it's actually quite simple. You'll only get one ballot paper. And we use a preferential voting system, which means you have to number from 1 to however many candidates there are, the preference in which you want them to be elected. And so that's essentially the system that we use. There's 93 seats in the Queensland Parliament. So in order for the government to form, it needs 45 seats. That's what they call a majority government. And if they don't make that 45, then sometimes they can basically make deals with the smaller parties that might win a few seats in order to form a government that way. So every Australian has the right to vote. Every Australian actually has a duty to vote. They do get fined if you don't vote. It's one of the sort of the great things about living in Australia is that we live in a democracy and we actually get to choose the government that of the day.
Yeah, that's a really fantastic ability and thing that we actually have as our right. And I believe that people you need to vote, and it's a thing that is so important and not enough people understand that. And segueing onto that, you've actually you're creating an app called New Vote, and so that's about getting people interested in voting or the politics. So could you tell me a little bit more about New Vote?
Yes, sure. So the democratic system in Australia is what they call representative, which means we vote for a person who then represents our views in the parliament. Now, there are different types of democratic systems. And so one of them is called direct democracy. That means voting directly on issues. And, Switzerland, for example, is the country that's the most famous for this in the world. They vote directly on issues 3 or 4 times a year, up to about 10 different initiatives. So they're not just electing a person to make the right choice, they're actually making the choice themselves. I believe direct democracy is something that we need more of here in Australia. But of course, when you talk about direct democracy, you might automatically start to think, well, what if the people don't know what is the right decision? And that's why we need to also make sure that people are making informed decisions. And that's called deliberative democracy. That means making sure that people have the right information, that they have the ability to discuss that, to weigh the pros and cons, and to come to a decision that represents their values. Right, so that's a little bit of an introduction. So there are these other concepts of democracy, not just representative. And so what I'm doing is I'm building an app that will allow people to see the issues that are relevant to them, to see the information about those issues, and then to vote on potential solutions. So it's not just sort of a complaints factory. It's not just a petition either, because people will be able to vote up and down, and they're able to make suggestions about what they think the solution might be. And then they're able to have their leader provide updates to them as to how those issues are progressing. So that's basically the model of what New Vote is about. But we're a startup. We don't have all the money in the world. And so we have had to start with universities. That's basically our strategic decision, to start working directly with universities, with student representatives and their students deciding campus issues. And so we have 2 pilots at the moment, one with the University of Queensland and one with the Queensland University of Technology. And we're just sort of going through the process of trying to, create something that's never been created before, and so there's a heck of a lot of learning, and it's a slow process. And there's days where you think, this is fantastic, we're getting somewhere, and there's days that you feel like, what am I doing with my life? And that's essentially what New Vote is about.
That's fantastic. I think it's such an important thing for people to really learn about politics, because, everyone is feeling like we're giving up on the government. And I read on your website, this is like the biggest time that people don't trust the government or just have given up altogether. And it's such an important thing for all of us to be informed and actually have an interest in this stuff. And you get a negative spiral happening there. If people lose faith in government, then the government is not as accountable to the people, and people are less likely to engage with government, and then less likely to try and influence government, which then means government has more ability to just kind of ignore the wishes of the people. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy and a downward spiral, and we are frankly still in that downward spiral at the moment. And that's not just in Australia, that's most Western democracies in the world. Yeah, it's a very interesting statement, because you can really see that going on in, say, America or here in Australia, where we just really have given up and we need something to help us bring it back up. So the app, how far in development is it?
It works right now. It's in operation. We've got about 200 users at UQ and about 250 users at QT. And, we're working out how to use the app, and I have weekly meetings with student representatives, to discuss how to add issues, how to add solutions, what issues to add, how to promote those issues to students. So we're really, we're going, the app works, it's stable, it's operational, it's secure, but it's probably about 5% of the app that I really dream of, that my vision is of. So it's got, the basic functions of issues and solutions, and it's got profiles for representatives, and it's got some feedback tools, and some, third places where we can put extra information for people, so they're making more informed decisions. But it's still got a hell of a long way to go. And that's just the way these things operate, unless someone decides to give me $1 million tomorrow, the app is going to grow slowly, and it's going to grow based on, iterations that the students and the student representatives say that they need.
Yeah, and I guess the more you push it to people in universities, the more people love it. And when it finally gets released to the full public and is at its full potential, we'll definitely promote it. And I think it's such a fantastic thing. I love it.
Thank you, mate. Thank you.
That's all right.
Appreciate it.
That's okay. So on to my next question, and it really is still about like getting people interested. So I have registered to vote, even though I'm not 18 yet. And I guess the Queensland state election. So yeah, I've registered to vote and I'll be 18 before the Queensland state election, which is good. Not a lot of us are. What can I do to help me decide who to vote for?
Yeah, it's a very good question. When people are asked after they've voted, what was it the most single important factor in your vote? You get about 50% of people saying it was the policies and the issues that were in that election, and then around 20% of people vote for the party, and then you get smaller percentages of people that vote for the particular candidate that is in their electorate or for the leader. We have essentially what they call a two-party system in Australia, which means that there's generally only two parties that will ever get enough seats in order to form government. So that's why during an election you might see, for example, Anastasia Palaszczuk and Deb Franklington, a lot on the news, and it becomes almost like a presidential style. It'll be sort of these two women against each other, and the news and the media will be comparing the two of them. But the funny thing is that you don't actually vote for them unless you live in their electorate. You'll only vote for your local member. And so, I think my personal opinion is that you should be making a decision based on the issues. And so what you would want to do is look at what issues are relevant at this election, whether it's the environment or it's education or it's, civil rights or, whatever it might be. Look at the party's positions on those issues. And then, unfortunately, you have to sort of make this mega decision, taking into account how important certain things are and which parties are holding those positions to come to a sort of general conclusion. That's what I think people should do. That's not actually what a lot of people do. A lot of people make decisions, like you were saying, based on what their parents might have voted for, because there is an aspect of tribalism in elections. People sort of tend to think, we're a Liberal family or we're a Labor family. We trust that party. We believe in that party. Even though the politicians, it's very difficult to validate exactly who's telling the truth or who has a better policy for the state or for a particular issue. We just know. People have a sense that we just know. We believe in that side of politics. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that that's the case. And so what you tend to get is about 30% almost of people voting the Labor side and 30% voting for the Liberal sort of national side. And then it's really actually those people in the middle who are, making up their own mind each election, what they call the swing vote, that actually decide the election. Mm. And so I think there's a lot of power actually being a swing voter, just as there's power in electorates that tend to swing, because the parties pay much more attention to those seats and to the needs of those people. So if you're living in a seat that is always won by a particular party, they start to take you for granted, and that's obviously not good for anybody. So I can't actually tell you who to vote for. Obviously, you have to make that decision up yourself. But it's essentially a combination of your values and the issues that are at play at the election, and to some extent, the history and the personalities of the people and the parties that are involved, and sort of where you feel as though the party should be, deserves a chance to govern, or maybe a party has been around a long time and you feel like they should be taken out and have a fresh party. So there's that kind of decision making as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for your advice. It's really like, vote for who you think will actually hold your values to themselves and like push that out to the rest of Queensland or wherever you're voting in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, fantastic. I'm going to ask a few more questions. So, mainly about now. I did talk to you about this one beforehand, and it really is sort of an odd answer or an odd question. It's like, how do you know when a politician is being truthful or not being truthful if they're just feeding you information that they want you to hear?
There's a joke about how do you know when a politician's lying? They'll be opening their mouth. But I don't actually necessarily believe that. I think a lot of politicians go into politics for the right reasons. That they do want to represent their community. They do have beliefs about the best way, essentially, the best way that we can live our lives. The thing is that the current political system, it's very complex. The modern political world is very complex, and there are a lot of forces at play beyond just the vote of the people or their opinion on a particular subject. So a politician will be influenced by the public service providing some advice. They might feel pressure from the donors to their political campaign. They'll certainly feel a lot of pressure from their party. That's the biggest thing. So your local member, they know that if they don't follow what their party tell them to do, that they're very unlikely to be, pre-selected, chosen as the candidate for the next election. So there's a real incentive there for them not to go against the party. On the other hand, they have a say in the party. They have regular meetings where they're able to, contribute to what they believe the party position should be. And so people are, also, politicians are also influenced by lobbyists. They're getting the media, they've got the opposition. So they're in a really quite tight position. And then there's also the sort of, aesthetics of modern politics is that you can't put your foot in your mouth. You can't just necessarily give that straight up honest answer that people are looking for, because you'll upset a certain portion of the electorate, and then you'll have everybody upset at you for, upsetting the apple cart. So they get trained in order to not answer questions, and they would generally try not to lie, because that builds a record. And, sometimes someone can be very honest their entire life and then lie one time, and it just stains them, and it really holds them back, and they can't ever recover from that. On the other hand, you get politicians that lie constantly. There's one very famous politician at the moment that, reputedly lies pretty much everything that he says. And essentially, they're still able to maintain their support. Although we will see shortly whether, in November, whether they do or not. But my answer is unfortunately very wordy and not very straightforward, because there is no way to tell whether a politician is lying. You have to make up your own mind based on the other evidence that's available. Your own common sense. The media does get a bad rap. We do tend to think that the media is contributing to the problems in the world today and in the political system, and that is certainly true to some extent. But there are parts of the media that are very good. There are investigative journalism, and there are journalists that are very straight up. And I think the best bet would be to have some of those media sources that you regularly listen to sort of make sense of the political spin that goes on.
Yeah, fantastic. It's a very, very detailed answer, and you can't really be brief on that one. It's like, where do you really end on that answer? It's like, everyone's different, and you really just have to have it in yourself to either know or call them out if they're obviously not doing the right thing. And so I guess finally I'd like to end off on this one. It's an important thing for young people mainly. why should young people get involved with the political system when it feels like we're never really listened to, and it's often our future which is impacted by political decisions?
Yeah, look, it's a good question, and there's one really good, strong answer I can give you. There's been for a long period of time a group of young people that have not enrolled to vote. Probably for about 15 years now, there's a good 30% of 17-year-olds that don't do what you did, and they don't enroll. And then there's a little bit of a loophole here, because if you never enroll, they don't send you fines. It's only once you enroll that then they know, they have your address, they have your name and so on, and they start sending you fines. It's not impossible for them to fine you otherwise, but that's generally the case. So there's a group of young people that just sort of said, well, I don't want to get fined. I don't believe in the system. I'm not going to vote. I'm not going to enroll to vote. Count me out. Yeah. The amazing thing is that if that group of young people actually en masse enrolled to vote and voted in one direction or the other, they would absolutely decide government of the day. So by not stepping in, they are essentially giving away control of the government to the older generations, the generations that have less skin in the game, in a sense, because it's not as much their future. So young people, as difficult as it is, I think the truth is that the worst thing than voting is just not voting. That it only allows you to make a certain degree of impact, but cumulatively it makes a big impact. And so that if you don't want to enroll and you don't want to vote, then essentially you have no right to complain. The system is not perfect, and your vote won't change everything overnight. But if you don't vote, then you're just giving up essentially on any change at all. So I definitely encourage young people to vote. I encourage them to do more than that. In the political system that we have, they can join campaigns for particular issues that they care about. They can do these kind of traditional lobbying techniques where they write letters to their MPs and so on. They're probably less effective nowadays than a good social media campaign, but young people are able to affect change. There's definitely no doubt that one person can make a huge difference. Greta Thunberg is kind of a classic example. In the United States there was the school kids that were affected by a school shooting, and they went on to make big waves. Obviously, prying the Americans from their guns is a big problem, and it doesn't get solved overnight. But young people can make a difference in the political system, and so that's why they should vote.
Yeah, that is so truthful, because the amount of people who I know who are just like, oh, I don't need to vote. Why would I do that? It's a corrupt system. It's only the old people who get the say and stuff like that. But it's like, it's your responsibility to, and if you really want change, do it. And if you don't, then you cannot say anything about it. That's one of my mum's classic sayings. And she says it to everyone who says that to us. She's like, well, if you don't vote, then you don't have a say over anything else. And it's the same with the American system as well. If you don't vote, you don't have a say.
Your mum is right, but I'm not happy with the way that the political system works at the moment, and that's why I'm actually one of the, I guess I'm privileged to be in a position that I'm able to actually try and make a difference, and that's why the New Vote sort of concept has come up, is because I was lucky enough at my university days to study political science. So, I was able to learn the theory and the ideals of how the political system is meant to work, but also you learn the reality of how the political system does work. And that discrepancy is what drives me, because, I see that we can do so much better as a human species, by ourselves and to each other and to the planet. So I think that I would encourage young people to definitely enroll to vote. That's the bare minimum. That one vote once every 3 or 4 years. That's the base. You can't not do that because the reasons stated before. But I would also encourage them to try and take steps beyond that as well.
Yeah, so for young people, how do we take those steps? Because often we are like, oh, but no one's told us how we do that. So are there websites or where are these places that we can go to make a difference?
Well, I think that sort of beyond representative democracy, you're really dealing with issues, right? That they're the core of what we're doing in the political world is dealing with issues. And so I think unless you are in a position to start a charity, educational charity that like I was, then I think you should probably pick one of those issues or 2 of those issues that you really care about and then you want to see changed. And then you do some casual Google research on that issue and you'll find that there are organizations that are already trying to do what you want to see done. And so you add your power to that organization. We who are trying to make the world a better place in the political world are often doing so without remuneration. We're often having to work other jobs and do other things. And so, every bit counts. Every volunteer can make a huge difference in those organizations. You might sort of think, oh, but they're big or they know what they're doing or, they don't need me. But quite often they really do need you. I mean, the skills that young people have, in the digital world, you could go into one of these organizations and you could revolutionize the place and you could actually, affect a real outcome because they're still, just thinking of, email campaigns or, posters on, billboards or something like that. So your uniqueness and your individuality and your passion and your beliefs can be channeled into those causes. And if you win a cause, then you can move on to the next cause. I think that's probably the best way. To go that extra level is to pick the things that really resonate for you that you need to fix. And let's face it, as young people, climate change is obviously going to be a huge issue for the majority of you. And so figure out there's a youth climate action coalition, for example, just, from the top of my head. They will be looking for people like you. They want you to join, and they want you to join their campaigns and march on the streets and sign petitions and so on. So that's we should start.
Yeah, which we all should be doing. If we're passionate about something or if we're passionate about a cause, we need to be doing it the best way that we can, the way that we know we can. So for us young people, we could be doing social media things. We could put out petitions on social media, really make that difference. Well, yeah.
Actually, I would say one more thing. That is, in a sense, you need a lot of different actors to make change. And so that path that I'm sort of describing is almost like, the lobby path, the activist path. But there are people that, that doesn't resonate for them, and for them, it might be that they need to work within the system. And so, perhaps the best thing for them is to, get a university degree and really study up and learn about that issue and get a job in government. Or for some people, it might be to join one of the political parties and start swaying them from the inside and eventually seek to have one of those positions of authority, a representative position, and then, advocate within your party for that change. So, I don't want to make it seem like there's only one path. There's many different paths, and there are paths inside the system and those paths outside the systems and paths that sort of cross in between both of those.
Yeah, fantastic. That was a great way to finish off our talk today. Thank you so much for joining me, Dion. It's been an honor having you on, and I know it's been a big day, and thank you so much for managing and coping with all my questions.
No worries. It was a great pleasure, and thank you for thinking of me, and good luck voting in October, and good luck finishing high school this year as well.
Thank you so much. Alrighty, that is the camera two. Hello, camera two. How are you going? Alrighty, that is the end of episode 5. We're going to be continuing going 5 more episodes. It's gonna be great, and vote. Enroll to vote. You can do it from, I think, when you're 16. Is that right? When you turn 16, you can enroll to vote. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's 16 or 17. Yeah.
It's one of those ages. Have a look. There's a website there. If you just search up enroll to vote or vote, it's the easiest process you could ever do. It doesn't take any more than 10 minutes to do so. I did it in school when I should have been doing work. My teachers were like, "Why are you doing this now?" I'm like, "Because it's important." And I would have forgotten about it later on.
Yeah. And at this stage as well, with COVID, I know you're closing up.
Yeah, no. Keep going.
It's very easy to do what they call pre-poll voting, which means in the weeks before the election, you can basically just rock up to a certain number of spots and you can vote. So there'll be less people around, probably smaller lines. But the other thing is that you can postal vote. And so once you've enrolled, closer to the election, the Electoral Commission will open up postal vote applications. And that, again, is super, super simple. You put your basic details in and they'll send out the postal ballot to you. So there doesn't need to be any risk, and you don't even have to go out on that Saturday day and stand in line and so on. You can just, it arrives by paper and you chuck it in a post box. That's the other way to do it.
Fantastic. So really, as a young person, you have no excuses not to vote. So get in there and vote, honestly, and enroll. It's easy. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Shit I Need to Know. Next week, I don't know what we'll be talking about, but it's going to be fun anyway, and we'll learn a lot. Thanks for joining me, guys.